And how long is this supposed to go on, by the way?
Well, they're going to rest in about 2 more days, the prosecution, and then the defense. I don't think the defense is going to go on too long. I would say we got about 3 more weeks here.
You've watched lots of trials. Does the jury look alert?
Oh, yeah, I think this is a wonderful jury. This is a really intelligent jury, and there's nobody falling asleep, you know, there's none of that stuff. They're very, you know, they're not allowed to take notes, which really surprised me. And
why?
I guess it's a it's a Connecticut thing. At the California trials, they all take notes, and which I think is very good. But they're very attentive. They don't miss anything. And there was a very dramatic moment in the case today with this Michael Meredith. He's had a reckless background, and he's been arrested 15 times. And in the cross-examination, Mickey Sherman got right in his face. And you know, Mickey is very effective, and so forth. And he said to Michael Meredith, "Have we ever talked?" And Michael Meredith said, "Well, you tried to contact me, and you certainly leaked my name to all the papers." And then he turned to Mickey, and Mickey was about this close to him, and he said, "I don't like looking at you. You're such an ambulance-chasing creep." And boy, the courtroom went, I mean, people were roaring with laughter or stunned or shocked. I mean, it was really quite a moment. And the judge had to call for order, and anyway.
The son of Don Meredith, the famed football player, and for years on Monday Night Football on ABC.
And, yeah, but this kid is now a movie producer, clean and dry, and has, you know, has just produced his first movie.
We're going to take a break. When we come back now, he's going to remain with us, Dominic Dunn. We'll have him pause for a couple of moments while we talk about the case involving Mr. Blake. We'll get his thoughts on that and other issues and take calls for Dominic Dunn. When we come back, Harlan Braun will join us, the attorney for Robert Blake, and then Nancy Grace and Mark Garagos will go at it, and then back to Dominic. Don't go away.
I do all her copying, faxing, and printing, and she barely says hi. Jim takes my copies to her desk, and now they're sushi buddies. Oh, super.
Toshiba copiers make you look good.
I do my very best to make sure that every time you ever witness a woman in the
media, it would be sure to reveal her true complexities and not just the same old stereotypes that everyone has become so accustomed to.
My whole family's on America Online.
AOL keeps me in touch with my daughter who's away at grad school.
I write my mom a lot. She has AOL.
I get to share pictures with my sisters.
My college buddies on my buddy list. My brothers are on my buddy list.
AOL is very easy to use.
It's like a community.
The parental controls help me safeguard my kids.
I keep in touch with my cousins and my grandparents.
AOL brings the world to you.
America Online has stuff you won't find anywhere else.
America Online, so easy to use, no wonder it's #1. Call 1-800-4ONLINE.
Keeps us connected. It's the best thing.
Is snoring a problem in your bedroom? Try Breathe Right nasal strips. Call now for your free Breathe Right Snore Stopper Kit, which includes 6 nasal strips, a coupon, plus information on snoring. Snoring is often the result of chronic nasal congestion, which may be due to allergies and sinus problems. Breathe Right strips gently lift open nasal passages so you breathe easier through your nose. Call now for your free Breathe Right Snore Stopper Kit. Sleep peacefully with this free offer. Breathe right, right now.
Famed crime writer Dominic Dunn with a fascinating inside, behind-the-scenes look at some of America's grittiest crimes and most notorious unsolved mysteries. From the Robert Blake murder case to the Ramseys and more. CNN Tonight on Larry King Live. The FBI is at the center of controversy. Were critical clues missed that might have prevented the September 11th tragedy? Take a revealing look at the Bureau and join the investigation on Lou Dobbs' Moneyline. CNN Tonight, 11:30 Eastern.
More than half of all Cuban Americans live in Florida's Miami-Dade County. They make up 29% of the county's population.
For those of you just joining us here in Miami, we are here because President Bush was here earlier today delivering a message to Cuban Americans on the 100th anniversary of Cuban independence. In a speech just a few miles down the road from here, Mr. Bush told a very responsive Cuban American audience that easing of the U.S. trade embargo on Cuba will happen only after Fidel Castro meets several strict conditions. Those include open and democratic elections, freedom for political prisoners, and economic reform. Here in Little Havana, you are more likely to see a coffee shop like this one with Cuban coffee than you are to see a Starbucks. Earlier, I toured this area of Little Havana with a professor of history, Jaime Suchliki, who is also a Cuban American himself. We began at the Freedom Tower. This is a place much like Ellis Island, where hundreds of thousands of Cubans coming from Cuba were handled and processed from the early 60s through the mid-70s. It's undergoing renovations now to make it into a kind of museum, and today it is draped with a Cuban flag in honor of the 100th anniversary of Cuban independence.
Yeah, this is where it all started. This is when the Cuban Americans arrived. This is where they created the refugee center. This is where they've been processed here. They received some money for subsistence.
Tell me a little bit about them, because that first wave was a little different than those who came later.
Well, the first wave that came in was the people that were connected with the Batista dictatorship. Then you had the business community that began to leave Cuba as confiscations and nationalization took place. And then by the mid-60s, this were the poor people of Cuba that had been dispossessed, had nothing, and they began to come in. And by the time the 70s come in, everybody that was coming in rafts and so on were the poorest people.
So now we're on Southwest 8th Street in downtown Miami. This didn't look like this back in the 60s.
This was a decaying area, a two-way street. It began to be built up when the Cubans arrived, and it has continued to be built up.
And this is Cafe Versailles, which is a very famous place in Little Havana.
Yeah, this is the meeting place for Cuban Americans. They start at 7 o'clock drinking coffee in the morning, and you can come here at 3 o'clock and midnight, and it's packed. This is where the Cubans gather, play domino, the older generation primarily.
One thing that strikes me is that here in Miami, the Cuban American community, it's really centered in Miami, unlike, say, Mexican Americans who might move all over the country.
Well, there's a lot of reasons. One, culture. This place is homey. Second is the weather. And third, I think there is a perception that has been dying down, but they were still there, that one day they're going to go back to Cuba, and Cuba will be liberated from Fidel Castro.
So stay close.
Stay close.
Stay 90 miles
That's right.
away. This right here is an eternal flame.
This
burning.
is dedicated to those who died, the martyrs that died in the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba.
Talk about the future a little bit. Do you think that most Cuban Americans who live here in Miami would go back if Castro weren't there anymore?
Well, most Cuban Americans will go to visit Cuba. Some of them will buy condominiums and retire there. Some of them will go for businesses, and some of them will go to live in Cuba. I think the minority will be the ones that would go and live in Cuba.
Is it also because they've made their homes here now? They're Americans now, less so perhaps than their old Cuban identity?
In part because they have family and they made their lives here, but in part because transition in Cuba is going to be difficult. And unless it's very fast, people are not going to want to sacrifice again.
Jaime Suchliki talking with me from the University of Miami. He is a professor of history there. One other thing that we talked about is how many Cubans who came here in that first wave, right in the early 60s, late 50s, bought round-trip tickets. They fully intended to go back to Cuba. They thought that Castro would be in power for just a few days or months. Instead, he's been in power for 43 years. Coming up, we'll talk with a woman who is not always the most popular person around these parts. She is a Cuban American who has returned to that country several times now, and she says most Cuban exiles in Miami don't have a clue what it's really like over there. We'll be right back.